This is what's actually coming for America, and I need to be upfront with you. This one is hard for me to make, because I'm not talking about stuff that already happened. I'm not talking about how expensive groceries got, or how your insurance doubled, or how the stores are closing. I'm talking about what hasn't hit yet, what's still on its way. And honestly, I've been going back and forth on whether to even say some of this out loud, because part of me doesn't want to believe it, and part of me is hoping that if enough people hear it, maybe we can get ahead of it. But the truth is, most of what I'm about to share with you is not a prediction. It's math. It's timelines that have already been set, deadlines that have already been signed into law, trends that are already moving and cannot be stopped by any election, any policy, any speech, and I'm going to walk you through all of it. Not to scare you, I promise you that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because somebody needs to say it in plain language, because the people who are supposed to be telling us are either too afraid or too compromised to do it. So let's get into it. And before I do, I want to say something that I think is important. I'm not making this video because I've given up. I'm making it because I refuse to give up. And I think the most dangerous thing happening in America right now is not any single crisis on this list. It's the normalization of crisis. We've gotten so used to bad news that we've stopped reacting to it. The numbers that would have caused national outrage in 2005 barely make the evening news in 2026. $1 trillion in interest payments? That used to be unthinkable. Now it's a footnote. 15,000 stores closing in a year? That used to be a national emergency. Now it's a Tuesday. Consumer sentiment at the lowest level in 75 years of measurement? That should be screaming from every headline. Instead, it's scrolled past in the feed between a recipe video and a cat meme. We've been anesthetized by volume. So many bad things have happened so quickly that our capacity to respond to any single one of them has been overwhelmed. And that anesthesia, that numbness, is the most dangerous condition a population can be in when real structural threats are approaching. Because the threats don't care that you're numb. They arrive on schedule whether you're paying attention or not. And the ones I'm about to describe are on schedule. They have dates, they have math, they have momentum. And most Americans have not been told about them in language that feels real, instead of abstract. Your job is about to be competed against by something that doesn't sleep and doesn't ask for a raise. I want to start with the one that I think is going to change everything faster than any of us are ready for. Artificial intelligence. And I know everybody's been talking about AI. Everybody's heard the hype, but what most people haven't heard, because the news covers AI like it's a cool gadget story, is what the actual job displacement data looks like right now. Not in 10 years, right now. Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, which is the firm that tracks layoffs in the United States, reported that approximately 55,000 jobs were cut specifically because of AI in the first 11 months of 2025. That's a 400% increase from the year before. 400% in 1 year. Amazon has cut more than 30,000 positions since late 2025, with 16,000 of those in early 2026 tied directly to what they call AI-driven restructuring. Salesforce eliminated 4,000 support roles because AI was handling half of all customer queries. Meta laid off roughly 8,000 workers to redirect the money into AI infrastructure. And the total number of job cuts announced by U.S. employers in 2025 was nearly 1.2 million, up 54% from the year before. And here's the part that keeps me up at night. A report from Cognizant estimates that 93% of U.S. jobs can be partially performed by AI. 93%. Goldman Sachs separately estimated that 63% of all U.S. work hours are exposed to AI, with 25 to 50% of tasks directly automatable. And the World Economic Forum projects 92 million jobs will be displaced globally by 2030. That's 4 years from now. And what really scares me about this is who it's hitting first. It's not hitting the people you'd expect. It's hitting white-collar workers. The people who went to college. The people who did what they were told. Got the degree. Got the desk job. Followed the plan. Customer service representatives are being replaced by chatbots. Data entry clerks are gone. Junior programmers are being displaced by AI coding assistants that write, debug, and optimize code faster than a human can. Junior analysts, middle managers, routine engineers, entire tiers of knowledge work are being compressed into systems that scale infinitely without overhead. And a researcher at Newsweek said that physical work is temporarily safe because robotics adoption has been slower than AI adoption, but that the gap is shrinking quickly, and that 2027 may be the year when manufacturing and construction begin to experience what is currently sweeping white-collar work. And the cruelest part of this whole thing is what it does to young people who are just trying to start their careers. There's been a 13% drop in employment for college graduates aged 22 to 25 in AI-exposed fields. The entry-level jobs that used to be stepping stones to careers are just vanishing. A young woman graduates, applies to 300 jobs, half never respond, a quarter say the role was restructured, and the rest ask for 5 years of experience managing AI systems she was never taught to use. And the question nobody's answering is this: how do you gain experience when the jobs that teach you the experience no longer exist? That's not a hypothetical. That's the reality right now for millions of young Americans. And nobody in Washington is talking about it because there's no political upside to admitting that the job market your children are entering may not have a place for them. And I want to tell you what this actually looks like in practice, because the statistics don't capture the human experience of it. I have a friend, 42 years old, who worked as a technical writer at a software company for 11 years. Really good at her job, won awards, got promoted twice. In February of this year, the company announced it was restructuring the content operations division. That's corporate language for "we're replacing you with AI." She was given 30 days, and the severance was fine, 3 months. But what wasn't fine was what happened next. She started applying for jobs. And the jobs didn't exist anymore, not just at her company, everywhere. The job boards had listings, sure, but when she talked to recruiters, they told her that most companies were cutting their content teams in half and using AI to fill the gap. And the jobs that were still available wanted someone who could manage AI content workflows, which is a skill she was never trained in because it didn't exist 2 years ago. So she's 42, with 11 years of experience in a field that just evaporated, trying to retrain herself on YouTube tutorials while her unemployment clock is ticking. And she told me something that stuck with me. She said, "I don't even know what to tell my kids to study anymore. Because whatever I tell them, it might be gone by the time they graduate. And that uncertainty, that inability to give your children a reliable path, is something I hear from more and more people every week. We used to be able to say, go to school, get a good job, work hard, retire comfortably. That was the deal. And the deal is broken. Not because people stopped working hard, because the definition of a good job is being rewritten in real time by technology that moves faster than any human career can adapt. And the retraining programs that politicians talk about are a joke. There is no federal program operating at the scale needed to retrain millions of displaced knowledge workers. The programs that exist are small, underfunded, and oriented toward manufacturing and trades, not toward the white-collar professionals who are actually being displaced right now. And the private sector has no incentive to retrain you because it's cheaper to replace you with software than to teach you how to work alongside it. You are on your own. And most people don't realize that until the email arrives telling them their position has been eliminated. Social Security is going to run out in your lifetime, and Congress has not introduced a single bill to stop it. Okay, this one is personal to me because I have family members who depend on Social Security, and I know a lot of you do too. And I've been wanting to talk about this for a while because I feel like people know Social Security is in trouble, but they don't actually know what that means in specific terms. So let me tell you exactly what is coming. The Social Security Retirement Trust Fund is projected to be depleted by the end of 2032 or early 2033. When that happens, benefits don't stop completely, but they face an automatic cut of approximately 24 to 26% under current law. That is not a political opinion, that is the projection of the Social Security trustees themselves, confirmed by the Congressional Budget Office. For the average retiree receiving $1,907 per month, a 24% cut brings that down to approximately $1,449 per month. The average rent in America is $2,100. Which means the average Social Security check after the cut would not cover rent in any major city in the country. And let me just put the demographic math in front of you because this is what makes it so terrifying. In 1950, there were 16.5 workers paying into Social Security for every one person receiving benefits. By the year 2000, that ratio had dropped to about 3.4 to 1. Today it's 2.8 to 1. And by 2040, it's projected to be 2.1 to 1. We went from 16 people funding one person's retirement to barely 2. And the reason is simple. The birth rate collapsed. The fertility rate in the United States has fallen to 1.62 births per woman, the lowest in the history of the Republic. Bloomberg reported that the United States may see its first population decline in 2026. There are not enough young workers entering the system to fund the benefits of the people who already earned them. And Congress has not introduced a single piece of legislation to address it. Not one. Not from either party. Because fixing it requires either raising taxes or cutting benefits, and neither of those options wins votes, so they do nothing, and every year of nothing makes the math worse. And the people who will pay the price are the people who paid into the system their entire working lives and were promised that the money would be there when they needed it. And it might not be. And nobody is telling them that in plain language. And Medicare is on the same trajectory. The Medicare Part A Trust Fund, the one that covers hospital bills, is projected to be depleted by 2033. After depletion, payroll tax revenue would only cover 89% of scheduled benefits, which means an 11% cut in payments to hospitals and doctors. And Medicare costs are projected to rise from 3.9% of GDP in 2025 to 6.2% by 2050, which will consume an ever larger share of the federal budget and crowd out spending on literally everything else. Roads, schools, veterans, research, environment. All of it gets squeezed because the mandatory programs eat the budget from the inside out. And interest payments on the national debt have already crossed $1 trillion per year. More than the defense budget, more than Medicare. Just interest. On money already borrowed. For things already spent. And I don't want to sound hopeless about this because I'm not a hopeless person. But I also think honesty matters more than comfort. And the honest truth is that the math does not work. And the math has been getting worse every year for 20 years. And nobody in a position of power has done anything to change it. And time is the one thing we're running out of. Because the longer you wait to fix a demographic problem, the more painful the fix becomes. And we've been waiting a very long time. And I want to make sure you understand what a 24% cut actually means for a real person. Because numbers are abstract and cuts are concrete. My mother-in-law lives on Social Security. Her check is about $1,750 a month. That's it. That's her income. She doesn't have a pension. Her 401k was depleted during a medical emergency in her early 60s. She has a small amount of savings that she's terrified to touch because she knows it's the only cushion between her and complete financial vulnerability. A 24% cut to her check would bring it down to about $1,330 per month. Her rent is $1,100. Her Medicare Part B premium is about $185. Her prescription copays are about $120. Her car insurance is $95. Her phone is $45. That's $1,545 in absolutely unavoidable fixed expenses, and her check would be $1,330. She would be $215 short every single month, and she would have to make up that difference by either not eating, not taking her medication, not driving her car, or draining the tiny savings she has at a rate that would exhaust it in less than 2 years. And she did nothing wrong. She worked for 38 years. She paid into the system every paycheck. She was told the money would be there, and it might not be, and nobody in Congress is working on it, and she doesn't know this is coming because nobody has explained it to her in these terms. The news talks about the trust fund and solvency dates and actuarial projections, and she doesn't know what any of that means. What she would understand is this: your check might get cut by almost a quarter in 7 years, and nobody is trying to stop it. That's the sentence. And nobody is saying it to her. 5 million people are about to lose their health insurance, and millions more will see their premiums double. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act was signed into law in July 2025. And buried inside it are some of the most consequential changes to the American healthcare system since the Affordable Care Act was passed over a decade ago. And most Americans have no idea they're coming because the bill was over 1,000 pages long, and the healthcare provisions were overshadowed by the tax provisions in the media coverage. So let me tell you what's actually in it. The Congressional Budget Office projects that the healthcare changes taking effect in 2026 will cause approximately 5 million Americans to lose health insurance. 5 million, and the mechanism is multi-pronged. First, the enhanced ACA premium subsidies that protected 20 to 22 million Americans expired on January 1, 2026. Stanford's Economic Policy Research Institute documented that an estimated 20 million Americans are seeing their insurance premiums roughly double starting this year. KFF analysis showed that premiums for qualifying households jumped from an average of $888 to $1,904 per month. That's not a gradual increase, that's a doubling in 1 year. And second, Medicaid work requirements are being implemented. The law requires non-disabled adults aged 19 to 64 to work, volunteer, or be in school for 80 hours per month to keep their Medicaid coverage. And the rule implementing those requirements was issued by HHS on June 1st, without public comment. States have until December 31st to implement the systems, and the CBO projects that more than 2 million additional people will lose access to SNAP, the food assistance program in a typical month as a result of expanded work requirements in the same law. And here's what breaks my heart about this. The people losing coverage aren't people who are gaming the system. Most Medicaid recipients who are subject to work requirements are already working, but their jobs are gig jobs, part-time jobs, seasonal jobs, jobs with hours that fluctuate from week to week. And the requirement demands 80 documented hours per month. Not 80 hours of work, 80 documented hours. The documentation is the barrier, not the work. When Arkansas implemented Medicaid work requirements in 2018, 17,000 people lost coverage in 3 months. Not because they weren't working, because they couldn't navigate the reporting system. And there was no increase in employment. The policy did not cause people to get jobs. It caused people to lose health care. And that same pattern is about to play out nationally. And the people it hits hardest are the people between 55 and 64, too young for Medicare, too old for the job market to treat them fairly, and now too bureaucratically burdened to keep the coverage that was supposed to bridge the gap. And let me tell you what losing coverage actually looks like for a person in that age group. Because the policy language obscures the human reality. A 58-year-old woman named Janet, in a hypothetical that represents hundreds of thousands of real cases, works 25 hours a week at a retail job. She doesn't work 40 hours because her employer won't give her full-time hours because full-time triggers a benefit obligation the employer doesn't want to pay. She works 25 hours at the retail job and picks up occasional catering shifts that give her another 10 to 15 hours some weeks. In a good month, she documents 75 to 80 hours. In a month where the catering shifts don't come, she documents 55 to 60. And the requirement is 80. And when she misses the requirement, her Medicaid coverage is terminated. Not suspended, terminated. And the law says she cannot fall back to the ACA marketplace with subsidized coverage because she was terminated for non-compliance. So she is uninsured at age 58, with high blood pressure, prediabetes, and a family history of breast cancer. She cannot afford the screening she was supposed to get this year. She cannot afford the metformin that manages her blood sugar. She cannot afford the lisinopril that manages her blood pressure. And within 6 months, the conditions that were manageable with consistent care become unmanageable without it. And when she finally ends up in the emergency room with a blood sugar crisis, the ER visit cost the system $8,000. The Medicaid coverage that would have prevented it cost $6,000 per year. We will spend more money treating the emergency that we created by removing the prevention that would have avoided it. And that math is replicated millions of times across the American healthcare system. It is the most expensive healthcare system in the world precisely because it is designed to treat crises rather than prevent them, to bill for emergencies rather than invest in maintenance, and to maximize revenue per encounter rather than minimize encounters per patient. And the OBBA made it worse. Not because the people who wrote it are evil, because the system's incentives are backwards. And the bill was written within those backwards incentives rather than in spite of them. The demographic cliff is here, and it changes everything from nursing homes to neighborhoods. This is the one that almost nobody is talking about, and it might be the most important thing on this list. America is aging. Not slowly, rapidly. The baby boom generation, approximately 73 million people, is moving into retirement, into their 70s, into their 80s. And the generation behind them, Gen the 10th, is about half the size. And the generation behind them, the millennials, are not having enough children to replace the population. The fertility rate of 1.62 is well below the replacement rate of 2.1 that is needed to maintain a stable population, and the consequences of this are going to hit in ways that most people haven't thought through. Nursing homes are already understaffed. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has documented chronic shortages in home health aides, nursing assistants, and personal care workers. These are some of the lowest paid, most physically demanding jobs in the economy. And the demand for them is about to explode as the boomers move into the age range where they need daily assistance. The Indeed Hiring Lab just published a major analysis showing that in healthcare, education, manufacturing, and government, retirement rates already exceed or will soon exceed 3% per year, well above the rate at which new workers are flowing in to replace them. The report warns of a great mismatch where there will be a relative abundance of available workers in some sectors and accelerating shortages in others. And Brookings documented that with dramatically reduced immigration, healthy monthly job growth could fall to zero or even turn negative by 2027. Not because the economy is collapsing, because there aren't enough people. And here's the thing that hits home for me personally. You drive through certain neighborhoods, certain small towns, especially in the Midwest, the South, parts of Appalachia, and you can see the demographic cliff with your own eyes, The elementary school that used to have 600 kids now has 280. The local businesses that depended on young families are closing because the young families left for the cities. The church congregation is entirely gray-haired. The Little League doesn't have enough players for 2 teams. The volunteer fire department can't recruit. The hospital closed its maternity ward because there aren't enough births to justify it. These aren't apocalyptic predictions. These are things that are already happening in thousands of American communities, and they're going to accelerate dramatically over the next 10 to 15 years, as the boomers age into their 80s, and the birth dearth of the last 2 decades fully manifests in the labor force, the tax base, the school system, and the consumer economy. A country with fewer young people is a country with less energy, less innovation, less demand, less tax revenue, less capacity to care for its elderly, less capacity to maintain its infrastructure, less capacity to staff its military. And the United States is entering that territory for the first time in its history. Every other challenge on this list, the AI displacement, the Social Security crisis, the healthcare cuts, is made dramatically worse by the demographic reality underneath it. Because every solution requires either more workers or more money, and the demographic trend is producing fewer of both. And I want to talk about what this means for the people watching this video who are in their 60s and 70s right now. Because the demographic cliff is not just an economic story, it's a personal one. If you are 65 today, you are going to need increasing levels of care over the next 20 years. Physical care, medical care, home assistance, transportation, companionship, and the workforce that is supposed to provide that care is shrinking. Home health aides earn a median of about $15 per hour. The turnover rate is over 60% annually in some states because the work is physically demanding, emotionally exhausting, and the pay doesn't reflect the difficulty. Immigration enforcement over the past 2 years has disproportionately affected the labor pool that fills these roles. A significant percentage of home health aides and nursing assistants are immigrants. When immigration is reduced, the pipeline of workers willing to do this work shrinks further. And the result is what we're already seeing: families who cannot find home health aides at any price, wait lists that stretch for months, nursing homes operating with dangerously low staff-to-patient ratios, and adult children, particularly adult daughters, who are quitting their jobs or reducing their hours to care for aging parents because the professional care system cannot meet the demand. Those daughters are losing their own income, their own retirement contributions, their own career trajectory, because the country failed to build a care infrastructure that could support its aging population. The cost of that failure is being absorbed by families, not by institutions. And it is going to get dramatically worse every year for the next 15 years, as the boomers move deeper into the age range where daily assistance is not optional but essential. And there is no plan, no national care infrastructure program, no workforce development initiative at the scale that would be needed, no policy framework that even acknowledges the scale of what is coming. We built highways, we built airports, we built the internet, we never built a care system. And the generation that is about to need one is the largest generation in American history. Nobody is prepared for what AI plus demographics plus debt does at the same time. And this is the part that I haven't heard anyone put together in one place, and I think it's the most important thing I can tell you today. Every one of the things I've mentioned so far, the AI displacement, the Social Security depletion, the healthcare cuts, the demographic cliff, is devastating on its own. But they're not arriving one at a time. They're arriving simultaneously, and they interact with each other in ways that make each one worse. AI displaces workers. Displaced workers stop paying payroll taxes. Reduced payroll taxes accelerate the depletion of Social Security and Medicare trust funds. Depleted trust funds lead to benefit cuts. Benefit cuts reduce consumer spending. Reduced consumer spending slows the economy. A slowing economy produces more layoffs. More layoffs reduce payroll taxes further, and the loop continues. At the same time, the demographic decline means fewer young workers are entering the system to replace the ones being displaced by AI. So the workforce shrinks from both directions simultaneously. AI removes workers from the top. Demographics fail to add workers at the bottom. And the programs that were designed for a world with 16 workers per retiree are operating in a world with 2.8 workers per retiree and heading toward 2.1. And on top of all of that, the national debt is $36 trillion. Interest payments have crossed $1 trillion per year. The debt ceiling needs to be raised by August, or the Treasury cannot pay its bills. And the One Big Beautiful Bill Act added another $3 to $4.7 trillion to the debt over the next decade, while simultaneously cutting Medicaid, SNAP, and the ACA subsidies that were protecting the most vulnerable Americans from the healthcare crisis. The debt makes every other problem harder to solve because the government's fiscal capacity to respond to a crisis is consumed by the debt service that the previous crises generated. We cannot borrow our way out of the next recession the way we borrowed our way out of the last one, because the borrowing from the last one is already consuming a third of all tax revenue in interest payments alone. And I keep coming back to this feeling, and I know a lot of you feel it too, that we're watching all of this in slow motion and nobody is doing anything about it. And it's not because the information is hidden. The Social Security trustees publish their report every year. The CBO publishes projections every quarter. The demographic data is available to anyone who wants to read it. The AI displacement numbers are in the business press every week. None of this is secret. It's all out in the open. And yet Congress has not introduced a single comprehensive bill to address the Social Security shortfall, has not introduced a plan to manage AI displacement, has not invested in the workforce retraining programs that would be needed to help displaced workers transition to new industries, has not raised the FDIC insurance limit from $250,000, where it's been frozen since 2010, eroding 31% in real terms, has not reformed the healthcare system in a way that would reduce costs rather than just shift them from one population to another. And I understand that governance is complicated. I understand that compromise is difficult. But the window for gradual reform is closing. The Social Security trustees themselves have said it. The longer we wait, the more dramatic the changes must be. A fix implemented today would require modest adjustments. A fix implemented in 2033 when the trust fund is depleted will require a 24% benefit cut, or a massive tax increase, or some combination that will be far more painful than anything we would need to do right now. And the same is true for every other problem on this list. Early action is gentle. Delayed action is brutal, and we are choosing delayed action on everything simultaneously. And I think the thing that most people don't realize is how these problems compound on each other at the household level. Think about a family. Mom is 57, dad is 59. They both work. Their combined income is $95,000. They have about $140,000 in their 401k. They own their home but still have $110,000 left on the mortgage. Their adult son, 28, moved back in after his content marketing job was eliminated by AI. Their mother, 82, needs help 3 days a week, but they can't find a home health aide, and the ones they've called are charging $30 an hour, which they can't afford. Mom's employer-sponsored insurance plan just increased their premium contribution by $200 a month, and the deductible went up to $4,000. Dad's company announced a restructuring that everyone knows means layoffs, and at 59, he knows that if he loses this job, the odds of finding another one at comparable pay are approximately zero because ARP data says 2/3 of workers over 50 have experienced age discrimination. They've been watching the grocery bill climb for 3 years. Gas is $4.26. Their property taxes went up $1,200 after a reassessment. Their homeowner's insurance went up 38% because of climate-related losses in other states, and their son, living in their basement, is depressed because he can't find a job, and the student loan payments are starting again. That family is not in crisis, not yet, but they are one event away from crisis, one layoff, one medical emergency, one car that needs a $3,000 repair, one water heater that fails, and the buffer between them and crisis is thinner than it has ever been. And the systems that are supposed to catch them if they fall, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, SNAP, are all simultaneously being cut, depleted, restructured, or overwhelmed. Every safety net has a hole in it. And the holes are getting bigger at the exact moment the number of people who might need the net is getting larger. That is what compound failure looks like at the household level. And it's happening right now in millions of American homes. Not in the future, right now. And the family I just described is not the worst case. The worst case is the single mother, the widower on a fixed income, the veteran with a disability who depends on the VA, the small business owner whose revenue has been declining for 3 years because the customers can't afford to spend what they used to spend, the retired teacher whose pension fund is underfunded by 40% and whose state legislature is debating whether to reduce benefits to balance the budget. Each of these people is facing the same convergence from a position of even greater vulnerability, and each of them was told at some point in their life that the system would take care of them if they did their part. They did their part, and the system is failing them. Not failing in the future, failing right now. And the convergence I've described in this video is going to make the failure worse, not better, over the next 5 to 10 years unless something fundamental changes. The water crisis is not coming in 50 years. It is here right now in communities across America. I want to talk about something that gets almost no attention in the national conversation, but that is going to affect more Americans more directly than almost anything else on this list. Water. The western United States is experiencing a mega drought that has been ongoing for over 2 decades. Lake Mead, the largest reservoir in the country, which supplies water to approximately 25 million people in Nevada, Arizona, California, and Mexico, hit its lowest level since the reservoir was first filled in the 1930s. The Colorado River, which is the primary water source for 40 million people across 7 states and 2 countries, is being allocated at levels that exceed its actual flow. More water is being promised to more people than the river actually contains, and the gap between the promises and the reality is growing every year as snowpack declines, temperatures rise, and demand increases. But it's not just the West. In the East and the Midwest, the infrastructure that delivers water to homes is failing. The EPA estimated that there are still 9.2 million lead service lines delivering water to American homes. The American Society of Civil Engineers gave the nation's drinking water infrastructure a C- grade, and estimated that $625 billion in investment is needed over the next 20 years just to maintain existing systems. And PFAS, the forever chemicals that have been used in non-stick cookware, food packaging, and firefighting foams since the 1950s, are now in the drinking water of an estimated 110 million Americans, according to the Environmental Working Group. These chemicals do not break down. They accumulate in the body, and they are associated with cancer, thyroid disease, immune suppression, liver damage, and reproductive issues. Jackson, Mississippi had its water system fail completely in 2022. Residents were without safe drinking water for weeks. Flint, Michigan's lead crisis began in 2014, and some residents still don't trust their water over a decade later. And these are not isolated incidents. They are the visible failures in a system where the invisible failures, the slow leaks, the gradual contamination, the aging pipes that haven't been inspected in decades, are far more widespread than the public understands. And the funding to fix it is not there. Because the federal budget is consumed by Social Security, Medicare, defense, and interest payments. The discretionary budget where infrastructure spending lives is being squeezed smaller every year. And water infrastructure, because it's underground and invisible, is always the last priority until it fails. And when it fails catastrophically. And the people who bear the consequences are always the poorest, the oldest, and the least politically powerful. And the Western water crisis is not a 100-year problem. It's a right-now problem. Farmers in California's Central Valley, which produces a quarter of the nation's food, have been forced to fallow hundreds of thousands of acres because there is not enough water to irrigate them. Cities across Arizona are restricting new housing construction because they cannot guarantee water supply for the next 100 years, which is a legal requirement under state law. Parts of the Ogallala Aquifer, the massive underground water source that supports agriculture across 8 states from South Dakota to Texas, are being depleted at rates that far exceed natural replenishment. In parts of Kansas, the aquifer has lost more than 60% of its saturated thickness. When the Ogallala goes dry in those areas, it's not coming back. Not in our lifetimes, not in our grandchildren's lifetimes. Geologically, it took millions of years to fill, and we're draining it in decades. And the food that comes from those farms, the wheat, the corn, the cattle, the cotton, does not just feed those states. It feeds the country. It feeds the world. And the water that makes it possible is finite. And we are using it faster than nature replaces it. And nobody wants to have this conversation because the conversation requires admitting that infinite growth on a finite water supply is physically impossible, and that admission undermines the economic assumptions that everything else is built on. But the water does not care about our assumptions. The water just keeps declining. And one day, probably within the next 20 years, a major American agricultural region is going to run out of water. Not run low, run out. And on that day, every American will understand what was coming and why nobody stopped it. Because the math was always there. We just chose not to do it. Here is what I think you need to hear right now, even if it is hard to hear. I've spent this entire video telling you what's coming. And I know that's heavy. I know some of it probably made you want to stop watching because it doesn't feel good to think about. And I completely understand that. But I also believe deeply that knowing is better than not knowing. Because the people who get hurt the worst in any crisis are always the people who didn't see it coming. The people who assumed the system would protect them. The people who trusted that someone somewhere was handling it. And nobody is handling it. I'm not saying that to be cynical. I'm saying it because the evidence is overwhelming. The Social Security trustees have been publishing warnings for 20 years, and Congress has done nothing. The CBO has been projecting healthcare coverage losses, and Congress passed the law anyway. The AI displacement data is pouring in monthly, and there is no national retraining program. The demographic projections have been available for decades, and no policy has been implemented to address them. The water infrastructure has been failing for years, and the funding has not materialized. At every level, the institutions that were supposed to anticipate and manage these challenges have failed to act in time. And the window for gentle action is closing on every single one of them. So what do? You do what people have always done when the institutions fail them. You take care of yourself, and you take care of each other. You reduce your debt, you build your savings, you strengthen your community, you learn skills that cannot be automated. You invest in relationships because in every crisis in human history, the people who survived best were the people who had other people they could count on. Not money, not titles, not portfolios, people, neighbors, family, friends, the person who would drive across town at midnight because you called and said you needed help. That's the asset that holds its value when everything else is losing theirs. And I want to say something directly to the people watching this who are in their 50s and 60s, because I know you're the ones feeling this the most right now. You're the ones who did everything right. You worked for 30 or 35 years. You paid into Social Security every paycheck. You paid into Medicare every paycheck. You saved what you could. You raised your kids. You played by the rules. And the rules changed on you. Not because of anything you did, because of decisions that were made by people who will never face the consequences of those decisions. And I know how that feels. It feels like betrayal, because it is. And I want you to know that feeling that way doesn't make you negative or ungrateful or pessimistic. It makes you honest. And honesty is the most valuable thing any of us can offer each other right now, because the alternative to honesty is denial. And denial is what got us here. 30 years of denying that the Social Security math didn't work. 20 years of denying that the infrastructure was crumbling. 10 years of denying that the job market was shifting. 5 years of denying that the cost of living was out of control. Denial is comfortable, but comfort has a cost. And we've been paying it with interest for a very long time. So no more denial. Not from me. And I hope not from you either. Because the first step in preparing for what's coming is admitting that it's coming. And it is. And here is the thing that I've come to believe after watching all of this unfold. The system is not going to fix itself. I wish I could tell you that an election will solve it, or a new law will reverse it, or a technology will save us. But the structural problems I've described, the AI displacement, the Social Security depletion, the demographic cliff, the healthcare crisis, the water crisis, the debt crisis, these are not problems one administration or one Congress can solve. They are generational problems that require generational solutions, and generational solutions require something America has not had in a very long time. Consensus. The ability of a divided population to agree on the diagnosis, agree on the treatment, and sustain the treatment long enough for it to work. And consensus requires trust. And trust is at 8% in Congress and 30% between citizens. Which means the prerequisite for the solution is itself in crisis. The problems are structural. The solutions require consensus. The consensus requires trust, and the trust is broken. Which means the path forward runs through the rebuilding of trust. One conversation at a time, one community at a time, one honest video at a time, one neighbor at a time, and that rebuilding doesn't start in Washington. It starts on your street. It starts at your dinner table. It starts with the person next to you at church or at the coffee shop or in the waiting room. It starts with saying out loud what everyone is thinking, but nobody is saying. Something is coming, and we need to talk about it. Not to panic, not to give up, but to prepare. Together, because together is the only way any of this gets better, and alone is the only way it gets worse. And I'll leave you with this. I think the fact that millions of people are watching videos like this, reading articles like this, having conversations like this, is actually the most hopeful sign in America right now. Because it means people are waking up, not to doom, to reality. And reality is not the enemy. Reality is the starting point. You cannot build a future on a fantasy. You can only build it on the truth about where you actually stand. And where America actually stands right now is at a crossroads that the history books are going to write about for centuries. And the people watching this video, the ordinary Americans who are paying attention, who are preparing, who are helping their neighbors, who are having honest conversations at their kitchen tables, those people are the ones who are going to make it through. Not because they're richer or smarter or luckier, because they saw it coming and they acted. So act. If you depend on Social Security, run the numbers tonight on what a 24% benefit cut would mean for your monthly budget. Not to scare yourself, but because if you see the gap now, while you have time, you can start closing it. An extra $100 a month saved between now and 2033 is $8,400 plus interest that stands between you and the gap. If you have a 401k or an IRA and you're within 5 years of retirement, review your asset allocation this week. A 30% market decline driven by AI correction, debt ceiling crisis, or war escalation would permanently reduce your retirement income. Talk to a fiduciary advisor about whether your risk exposure matches your timeline. If you are employed in a role that involves writing, analysis, customer service, data processing, or administrative coordination, start learning to work alongside AI tools now. The workers who augment their productivity with AI will be the last to be displaced. The first to go are the ones who pretend it is not coming. If you have adult children struggling to find work, talk to them honestly about what the job market looks like. Trades, healthcare, elder care, skilled maintenance, and infrastructure repair are the sectors where human hands are still irreplaceable and where demand will explode over the next 15 years as the demographic cliff deepens. If you have variable rate debt, pay it down before the convergence pushes rates higher. If you heat with oil, fill your tank in the summer. If you drive to work, calculate what $5 gas would do to your budget. And above everything else, invest in your community. Know your neighbors' names, share meals, trade skills, build the local resilience that no policy can provide and no institution can replace. Talk to your spouse about your finances tonight. Call your mother and ask about her Medicare. Check your Social Security statement. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because this is what's actually coming for America, and the people who prepare are the people who make it through. And you're watching this, which means you've already started.